In Escape from Tarkov, one of the most important things you need to learn early on is that the gun you use does not determine the amount of damage you deal. It's actually the ammo itself and its plethora of stats working together. But this concept goes quite a bit deeper than X ammo does Y amount of damage. So today, I'll be walking you through every stat you'll need to know to have a full understanding of how ammo works in EFT. Before we get into it, you can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/giantbootsock or on TikTok under the same name. Ammo stats can be split up into two categories: stats you can view in-game when inspecting a particular round, and stats that are hidden from the player, which we can only view outside of the game as a result of players digging into the game data. Due to the importance of the hidden data, I'm going to be starting with that set of stats. A lot of what we go over today can be viewed in more detail on both the Escape from Tarkov wiki, as well as No Food After Midnight's EFT ammo site. NoFam also has a great blog post which more deeply goes into the math and mechanics of how ballistics work in EFT, much more in depth than we'll be talking about in this video. All of the hidden ammo stats can be found either on the EFT ammo site or by going to the ballistics page on the Tarkov wiki. Each of these resources will be linked in the description, and I highly recommend reading through them after watching this video. Starting with the hidden stats, the first number we need to talk about is damage. Every round in Tarkov is assigned a base damage amount, which cannot be viewed anywhere in-game. This number is the maximum base amount of damage that will be dealt to a limb if no other variables are affecting it, such as armor or distance. There isn't much more to the stat at the moment, but a few of the variables we'll look at going forward. We'll keep coming back to reference it. Next up is penetration, or pen, which can get a bit complicated. Each round has a pen value represented by a number. In short, the higher the pen, the greater chance that a round has to pass through armor and damage the target. Higher pen rounds also tend to have less base damage than their lower pen counterparts. The actual penetration chance is determined by three factors: the pen value, the class of the armor being hit, and the durability of the armor. If a round does penetrate, it'll deal between 0 and 40% less damage than its base damage stat. The higher the chance the round had to penetrate in the first place, the higher the damage that'll be done after penetrating. A good rule of thumb is that every 10 pen is a higher armor class that a round will be able to penetrate. For example, a round that has 30 pen will easily penetrate class 3 armor, while a round that has 50 pen will easily penetrate class 5 armor. If a round does not end up penetrating, blunt damage will be dealt to the target, which is very minimal in the majority of situations. Higher penetration values will also result in higher durability damage done to armor, but if a round penetrates, it'll do slightly less damage to the armor than if the armor had stopped it. The third out-of-game stat you should know is Fragmentation Chance. While this isn't a stat that's typically considered when choosing what round you're going to use, it's still important to have an understanding of what it is and the mechanic it pertains to. Nearly every round in the game has a chance to fragment on impact. If a round ends up fragmenting, it'll create 2 or more rounds whose damage together is equal to an extra 50% damage on top of the damage being done by the original bullet. These fragments typically hit the same limb as the original bullet, but have a chance to redirect to other hitboxes as well. An issue with this mechanic, which has been present for a few years, is that any round with a pen value under 20 will never fragment, regardless of its fragmentation chance. This isn't really an issue though, as again, the stat isn't necessarily a deciding factor when choosing which round you're going to use. Now that the hidden stats are out of the way, we can move on to the stats that can be viewed in-game when inspecting a round. Most of these are pretty straightforward, but there are quite a few to get through. First up is the caliber. This is the size of the round and determines which weapons and mags the round is compatible with. For any gun, you can look in the bottom left corner of its icon to see which caliber it's compatible with. This compatible caliber will also be listed in the name of any gun or magazine when inspecting it. Next is velocity. The higher the velocity of a round, the less that it'll drop vertically over distance. Bullets will also lose both damage and penetration value over long distances. The speed of a round mostly correlates with its size, with small rounds from SMGs usually traveling quite slowly, around 300 to 400 meters per second, and rounds from larger rifles traveling very quickly at 700 to 900 or more meters per second. Recoil is another stat you'll often see on various rounds, affecting directly what its name implies. Whatever the recoil of your gun is, a round with the recoil stat will affect it either positively or negatively. For example, the MP7 is a versatile SMG with very little recoil, but its recoil can be dropped even further by running it with subsonic rounds, which have a -22 recoil stat. Rounds like this can completely alter the performance of a weapon, so it's best to always test your build with the rounds you choose in your shooting range prior to entering a raid. Another performance stat you'll often see is accuracy. Similar to recoil, the effects of this stat can be either positive or negative. Your weapon's accuracy is represented in MOA, which is shown when inspecting the weapon. The larger the MOA, the less accurate your weapon will be at range. The accuracy stat on the round you choose will directly affect this accuracy as a percentage, but typically isn't large enough to significantly alter how your weapon will feel. As always, try to test different rounds with your builds before using them in a live raid. A pretty simple stat you'll see on a few rounds in the game is bleed chance. This is another percentage stat which can only work in your favor, providing a boost to the chance that the round will cause a bleed when impacting the enemy. The rest of the stats we're going to go over are all related to durability and malfunctions. Starting off, we have durability burn, represented by percentage. The more you use a weapon, the more its durability will decrease and require repair. If you use a round that has an increased durability burn stat, your gun will decrease in durability more quickly per shot. This is important to consider, especially with high fire rate weapons, because lower weapon durability results in higher malfunction chance. Next is heat. With every shot you take, your gun heats up, and whenever a shot is not being fired, your gun is cooling down. Rounds that have the heat stat adjustment will adjust the rate of gun heating accordingly when fired. Heating and cooling rates can also be affected by various gun components, such as handguards and muzzle devices. The higher the heat level that a gun reaches, the higher the chance of a malfunction, and the higher the rate that the durability will decrease. Lastly, we have stats which directly affect malfunctions themselves. There are currently 4 types of malfunctions: misfire, jammed bolt, failure to eject, and failure to feed, all of which can have an increased chance of occurring due to the round used, other than bolt jams. This increased malfunction chance will be listed as low, medium, or high, alongside all other stats on the round's inspection screen. Again, these stats are not necessarily a major deciding factor when it comes to choosing a round, because you'll need to deal with weapon jams regardless eventually. And those are all the stats you should understand when it comes to ammo in Tarkov. But before we wrap up, I'd like to touch on the process of choosing which ammo you should be using. Typically, you want to shoot for the highest penetration rounds you have available to you. These will usually be priced higher and available only at higher trader loyalty levels or after completing a particular quest. The benefit of using these is that you'll be able to shred through whatever armor your opponent is wearing without having to second guess your approach to the fight. This doesn't rule out the effectiveness of high damage, low pen rounds though, as these can be used for the leg meta playstyle, where you avoid shooting armored areas entirely. Many calibers have very well balanced rounds, which have both an ideal pen and damage value at a decent price. Examples of these would be 7.62x51 M80 and 5.56 M855A1. Be sure to check out the ammo charts to find out the stats of the ammo you have at your disposal. These numbers are changed frequently during and with wipes, so what was worth using 6 months ago may no longer be worth using today. And that's going to wrap it up for this video. Hopefully this information helps clear up some of the confusion around learning ammo in EFT. Again, definitely check out the links to No Food After Midnight's documentation in the Tarkov wiki in the description. If you have any questions or suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.